Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Rejuvenate edition number 3. We're so happy to have you back again, and I cannot believe that 1 month has passed by so quickly, right? Well, for those who are just joining us for the very first time on the Rejuvenate talk series, just very quickly explain to you. So the idea of Rejuvenate is for us to talk about all things youth-centric, especially things that are, we are addressing global matters, and we want to have youths to be more involved in our series. And we have got fantastic guests from all over the world. As of the last edition, we have hit 44 countries, and I'm sure we are going to add on to more countries in this edition. And we are very privileged and honored to welcome a new guest who is actually based in South Korea. And his name is Danny Kim. Danny, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. Thank you for having me here.
Very nice to have you. Well, I'm just going to do a very quick introduction about you so that our audience know who you are. But I'll leave the full background story and whatnot to you later on. So Danny is a documentary filmmaker, obviously based in Suwon, South Korea. And he has done many feature documentary films throughout his career. His documentaries such as Love Child has been on Sundance, has been on Jeonju International Film Festival, Wisconsin Film Festival, and whatnot. And not only that, he has a background in journalism. He used to be a journalist, and obviously he has also been teaching in Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism at USC and the University of Utah Asia campus. So we'll leave all that details later on as we have the conversation with him. But Danny, once again, welcome. Danny is the founder of DocuPlus. Perhaps you would like to introduce yourself, Danny.
Thank you. I don't know what else to add because I think you pretty much covered it. But yeah, my name is Danny. I'm based here in South Korea. I just moved here back like 2 years ago. I was based in Los Angeles before. And like Andrew just mentioned, I've been working as a filmmaker for many years. My first feature documentary film called Love Child went to Sundance back in 2014, followed by like Jeonju and Wisconsin and other places. The film was also based in South Korea and was about internet gaming addiction, where these two young couples were so immersed in this virtual child raising game, they kind of neglected their own baby. And it was the first case where they were trialed as a psychological, like psychiatric case. So yeah, it's just bringing me back memories. It was like 2-year journey. I've been working with the director from New York City, who first saw the news clip from CNN when she was like traveling somewhere, and decided to make a feature film about it, and came to Korea, and got in touch with me, and that's how I first started that project. And ever since then, I kind of had this vague idea of like, how can I like be a full-time like documentary filmmaker? Because I really enjoyed that experience, and it was really cool that I wanted to like make a living out of it. But it wasn't until recently that I transitioned into that role. Like Andrew mentioned, I was working as a journalist for many years. I used to be a foreign correspondent for this French news agency called AFP here in South Korea, and I covered like both North and South Korea. So it was a pretty busy job. Like I've been working for them for like more than 3 years. After that stint, I was like, oh, it's getting tiresome. I wanted to get back to the idea of like going into documentary film. So I decided to apply to a bunch of grad schools in the US because I also wanted to like go back to the US, and it was a good excuse to like use grad school as a transition to go back. So luckily I got accepted into Duke's MFA program, which is like pretty prestigious for documentary program. It's like one of the top programs in the nation. So I went there for 2 years, and during my master's program, I wasn't sure at first what kind of film that I wanted to make, but for some reason, this like ferry disaster that I covered during my journalism career kept coming back to me, because during that time also like President Park was getting impeached, so I was keep getting all these news from Korea, even though I was living in like North Carolina in the US. So one day I decided to go back into my hard drives, and I was looking at all these archival footages that I shot, and boom, it was like, oh, I have to do this. So I ended up working on a short documentary film called Still Waters, which was based on the ferry disaster back in 2014. So I ended up going back to Korea twice to film it, to follow with the family. So that was kind of like my real transition into like documentary, because prior to that, like I was just like kind of like half and half. Like my foot was on like two different sides of the world, because like journalism was heavily like, it was a busy like 24 hours news cycle, right? But I feel like taking a break from that crazy environment, I'm finally getting the time to focus on like one in-depth story at a time. So right now I'm just working on zero waste, but I can get to that much more later.
Yeah. I just want to pull back a little bit to the first feature documentary that you were talking about, Love Child. And I've watched it before. It's fantastic. And for those who have not watched it yet, I think you can still get it on HBO. Is that right, Danny?
I don't know, because we don't have HBO in Korea, so I can't really confirm. But when I was in the US, like 2-3 years ago, for some reason I couldn't find it. And the director now lives in UK. I'm sure she has a copy, but yeah,
So I was going into that. It's funny because it's called Love Child simply because the couple named the child Sarang, if I recall correctly. Yes, and it's so ironic at the end of the day, right? In terms of what happened to the child. Now, is online game addiction still a very big issue in Korea today?
I mean, I was just reading about it yesterday that Korea just like as of this week or something, they lifted the Cinderella rule that came around that time when I was filming that documentary, where
the Cinderella rule.
Yeah, everything shuts down at 12 a.m. So people like young students, they don't like spend all night playing video games or like online game. So I think that rule is lifted because obviously because of that, like the Korean gaming industry suffers so much, and we're like losing competition to other countries like China, like Japan, and other in the US. So I think the gaming industry is trying to like change that rule, and they kind of successfully did it. I don't quote me on this because I haven't really paying attention to that industry for some time, but I mean I am fascinated with South Korea. Since then, like it's already like almost 10 years since I worked on that project, but since then the esports like industry skyrocketed. Like South Korea obviously has one of the best top esports players. So it's interesting to see like that whole industry is like booming. Some say like gaming industry is like bigger than the movie industry. So I mean that alone just tells it all. So I'm just fascinated by like the dynamics of that.
Yeah. Now, when you started DocuPlus, obviously only around March this year, if I recall correctly, right? The whole idea was to deliver socially impactful documentaries. Now is documentaries just the main focus, or are you also moving into many other spheres or genres of film in that sense?
Obviously I am going to start with documentaries because that's my expertise. But what I've been realizing is as I'm working on this project, there's so many other things that I can do with this social impact entrepreneur spirit. One of the ideas I had was to like take this business and like reach out to all these like all these like other like NGOs and like government or like academic institutions that, you know, vouch for like, let's say for my zero waste project, I've been working, well, not working, but like contacted this professor at Korea University who took an interest in my project, and they kind of took me in as their committee member as they're planning to hold this international ESG forum next year, like 2022. So he thought that because I'm a millennial and I'm doing this like new business and working on these like kind of like social impact, environmental themed documentaries, he thought I could bring some value to his like committee. So I think that's cool that I get
Fantastic.
to work in that capacity. But for long-term goal, I do want to, even though I'm starting as a documentary production, I do want to eventually build my IP, you know, next 5 years working on various stories that maybe one or those two stories can like, you know, fictionalize. You know, I feel like the trend here is like, you know, all these cool documentary films do sometimes turn into like fiction films as well,
Yes,
based on a
that's
true
right.
story. So, you know, because I have a film background, I think that could be my long-term goal.
Great. Now we've heard the word zero waste a couple of times now in our conversation. So obviously zero waste is your current and latest project that you're working on right now in Korea. Could you give us a little bit of a background of what zero waste is all about? How did it came about in terms of the idea, and how are you approaching this documentary?
You know, it's funny because prior to working on this project, I mean, I do my part in recycling because every Korean citizens, believe it or not, do a pretty good job in terms of like following orders and doing their part. But it's not like I was an environmental activist that was like die hard, like I have to like make a change. But it wasn't until like believe it or not, the COVID-19 pandemic that I started realizing even me as an individual, I started, you know, prior to this, I never was the type of person who would actually call delivery apps, you know, because I just find it absurd. Because why don't you just walk there and, you know, go to like neighborhood restaurants? Because the part of fine dining experience for me is to actually enjoy the atmosphere, right? But because of the pandemic, that experience was like always like limited. So I just ended up like rest of the people like ordering from like Yogi or Pedare Min족, which is like the Korean delivery services here. And every time they come, like I realized all these like plastics were like piling up. So if me as an individual is already like increasing exponentially, like the use of single-use plastic, imagine that, like we have like 52 million population in South Korea. So multiply by that by 52 million, where is all this plastic waste going? So that was my initial thesis or like question that I had. And during the same time, I saw these news report. There was like constant like bombardment of like news reports saying all these like plastic waste is exponentially increasing because of like the corona pandemic. And like serendipitously, I saw this cool like 23-year-old artist who's trying to make a change by like upcycling like COVID-19 masks to produce like cool like stools and furniture. So I thought that was pretty novel and like artistic in his own way. So he started gaining a lot of media attention, and I thought maybe I could contact him. And fortunately, one of my colleagues at Reuters who did the story on him shared his contact info, and I just like reached out to him saying, hey, I used to be a journalist, but I'm now an independent documentary filmmaker, and I'm interested in your story. Can we meet up and see if we can potentially work together? And, you know, just doing a cold call like that, he responded and we met up and we kind of like vibed. And from there, we agreed that, you know, he actually told me because he's been getting all these like media requests. He was starting to like say no to all these press requests because it was taking so much time. But when he met with me, he was like, okay, I believe in what you're trying to do, so I'll help you. And that was kind of like, I was very honored by that because, you know, I'm not like I'm not like Bong Joon-ho or anything. But because he believed in me, like I had this responsibility to, you know, do justice for his time. So, you know, we coordinated a bunch of time because, you know, as you can imagine, making a documentary takes time. I had to like visit him multiple times. And, you know, he's a busy artist, so it was really tricky to arrange time. But we managed to do it like 2-3 times. And then I think I'm going to follow up with him like maybe early next year to see how much progress he made. So the idea of zero waste came because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the artist. And I just wanted to show people that, you know, all these individuals are making a difference and it's not that difficult. And once all these groups of small like individuals, like maybe hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands take action, the big system can't ignore us forever. So because of the age of social media, I feel like what we say as a voice that can be heard.
The collective voice.
Yeah, and I think what I like about documentary is I can actually be the spokesperson. I mean, I'm not trying to make like a propaganda or anything, but for documentaries dealing with environmental issues, I think it's a good platform to, you know, raise our voice and show people that there are enough people who cares about the environment, and here's what the small steps they're taking. If you like what you see, you know, be part of it and help spread the word, and maybe, you know, you could follow them, their journey, and, you know, make a small contribution to, you know, maybe if you walk around your neighborhood and see some trash on the street sideway, you can, you know, pick it up, you know, that's not difficult. Things like those small kind of action, I think does matter. And even as I'm still making this film, like I told you before, I'm not like 100% clean myself in terms of like being an environmentalist, but since I've been working on this project, I became more mindful of my environment and my surroundings, and I try to do my part.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Well, the idea of Rejuvenate when we did it was obviously to leave a meaningful impact to our audiences. You know, most of them who are youths, right? And the first edition that we had was obviously in conjunction with World Environment Day. You know, so I totally get what you mean in that sense. Now, in the story, obviously, it was inspired by this artist who was using recycled face masks and whatnot. But I also understand there are also 3 other individuals or change makers, if you would like, that you are featuring as well in the documentary. Is that right, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, I figured initially I was just going to focus on him as an individual character, but I realized like my ambitions kind of grew from that, and decided to make it into like a feature documentary, like 65-minute long. And in order to do that, I can't just use one character, even though he's pretty compelling. I felt like I need to add in more perspectives and what others are trying to do at the same time. So I started digging up for more like interesting characters, and that's when I found other characters such as this co-owner of this zero waste shop called Armengtanjong in Seoul, who's pretty vocal environmentalist who not only owns the shop that does like refill stations of all these like cosmetics and like detergents. She's pretty vocal and like lecturing in community organizations like in May I kind of followed her giving a lecture at the local YWCA, where a group of like moms gather, and was like listening to her like lecture about how dire the environmental situation now is and what we can do to make a difference. So things like that, I think it's pretty interesting to me, because it's not like she's not like a professor giving a lecture to students, but she's a pretty passionate and pretty knowledgeable in her own right to, you know, inspire like the local people, like community to, you know, think again when they're living their day-to-day lives, how they can make a difference. The other character is quite renowned urban ecologist and like the director of circular economy in Korea, and he wrote this best-selling novel, like That's Not Trash, where he explains how to recycle properly, and it's a pretty detailed book about which gets recycled and which not, and how to do it properly. And even though it's pretty detailed, it's pretty fast read because it's really like written in a way that's easy to like flip the pages and get like, oh, I didn't know this was not recyclable, and how to do it properly. And he also owns his own like YouTube channel. He has a massive following. So I thought that was pretty interesting. He's like a one-person researcher as well. And, you know, I decided to include him because I thought maybe I need some more expert opinions on what the brand is. The last character I found was another activist who's also like she's probably like Gen Z. All my characters are pretty young, except for that researcher. And she works with this Korea Federation of Environmental Rights, and they have this business called Plastic Mill, where they kind of got the idea from the traditional mill, but they incorporated with the plastic as ingredients. So they collect all these like bottle caps, like hundreds of thousands of bottle caps, and they smash that into like a grinder and like make this cool, like, you know, like particles, or I don't even know what to call it. And they kind of upcycle to you know, reusable products, such as like, you know, those like toothpaste holder where you kind of like sometimes it's really hard to like squeeze out all the toothpaste, right?
Yes.
So it helps you once you like stick it into the toothpaste, you can like
Correct.
squeeze it to the last like whatever is inside. So I because prior to that, what I used to do, which maybe might be a little bit better, I just cut with my scissors in half, and I just, you know, dig out until the end. But the problem with that is it kind of, once the air gets in, the toothpaste, the remainder of the toothpaste like kind of dries up. So it kind of like inconvenient. But yeah. I'm seeing a lot of questions, by the way.
So fantastic for in a way very diverse background in terms of your characters, and I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful feature documentary at the end of the day. Just before I segue to the question, as you have noticed as well, we've got a couple of questions in already. I perhaps just to set the tone as well, because some of the questions here may be quite related. What is the general awareness of zero, you know, plastic waste or plastic pollution or environmental issues in Korea itself, especially with the youths? What is their awareness like, Danny?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm gonna like, based on my experience, because I told you before, I grew up in the US and I just moved back here like 2 years ago. So I had like the both perspectives. And I feel like the youth today, not just in the US, but in Korea, they're pretty like at another level, because even I'm a millennial, right? And even though I'm really interested in like all these like social issues and environmental issues, I feel like the Gen Zs, they're actually taking to the next level, because all these like, because when they were born with all these like gadgets, right? When they were born, they had like iPhones and like iPads and internet access and things like that. So I feel like they can actually take these messages into like a wider level using social media. And I think both in the US and Korea, all the youth are doing a phenomenal job in terms of like standing up to the, you know, environmental causes. And now that I'm based in Korea, I'll just talk more about the Korean side, is that all the people I meet, they are really passionate about like, you know, saving the planet. And like I met you in Clubhouse, Andrew.
Yeah.
I've been going into all these like environmental themed rooms in
Mm-hmm.
Clubhouse, and surprisingly in Korea themed rooms, there's always like an environmental related rooms in Korea as well. So I would just randomly pop in and like hear what they're saying. And I discovered this activist based in like Jeju Island who what she does is super cool, is that because of all these like ocean waste popping up in like the beautiful beaches in like Jeju, what she and a group of her friends started doing is like to go around the beaches and start cleaning up. And the way she does it is using Instagram and social media. She posts all these like snippets of clips and like photos. So after meeting her, maybe I think I should include her in my documentary, because what she's doing is super interesting and relevant to what I'm trying to tell. And you know,
Yeah, that's so great. We also have a lot of youths in Malaysia who are advocating for these same things as well, and it's so refreshing to hear that the coming generation, the Gen Zs especially, you know, are really taking to heart the problems that obviously we have left behind for them. You know, now. So moving on to the questions, I suppose we will just take a couple of minutes to address these. I will skip to the second question first because it's still kind of related to just what we spoke about. It is from Eugene. It says here, good morning. Danny mentioned about Koreans, you know, being good at following orders. But how open are the general public towards zero waste? Do they try to avoid using plastic while purchasing things? So you mentioned this earlier, you know, this whole thing came about because well, obviously there was a lockdown in Korea, I suppose, and you had to use delivery apps to be ordering food and stuff like that, right? A lot of plastic are used in that method. Now, in that question, I suppose, what are the general public trying to do to avoid this, or are retailers you know, putting a stop to plastic use, you know, giving you the option of ordering the food without plastic utensils, ordering the food with probably alternative packaging or things like that. Is that happening in Korea right now?
yeah, actually it is. Even when I go to these like kimbap places near in my neighborhood, I noticed like they ask you, do you want plastic spoon? And I always say no, because you know I can always use my own utensil when I bring back home. And even when you're using the delivery apps, they have an option to like, do you want the option to have like plastic chopsticks and like utensils? And I always say no, because like, why do I need them? I have tons in my home. So things like that, I noticed it's changing a lot since I came back to Korea, because when I first came back in 2019, pre-COVID, just before the COVID, like I didn't really notice it much. But now it's all the evening news is always talking about like plastic waste. There's even this cool startup. Again, I might include them in my documentary, but maybe not. What they're doing is, you know how there's so many cafes in Korea. I don't know if you think so. There's like million Starbucks like on the same street. We have more Starbucks per capita than New York City, believe it or not.
Danny, 주세요.
So this startup, what they're doing is they're trying to promote the idea of reusable cups. So it's called Trash Busters, and I'm not here to PR them because obviously I don't have any ties with them, but I think their idea is pretty noble and pretty cool. You can deposit like 1,000 won, which is like $1, and they'll give you a reusable cup. And what they do in order to alleviate like people's concern, like in the news program, they're talking about how they do like 7 different types of sanitation in terms of cleaning their reusable cups, using all these like methods. And then once a person like me go to this cafe A and get that cup and refill, I can actually return that cup to cafe B if they're affiliated with that program. So you don't have to return to the same cafe. and I've been noticing a lot of cafes started using them. And I'm bringing this up because I was shooting more B-rolls at this zero waste shop that I've been following, and they just opened a second store in Seoul Station. And when I went to their second store, they had that trash buster, like reusable cup. So I was like, whoa, I saw this on TV. Can I try? So they made me an iced coffee using that. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I feel like the general population in Korea, we're pretty aware of the situation and we're trying to take part. But even when I talked to the urban ecologist, he was saying, at the end of the day, individual actions might matter, but if the producers of single-use plastics, if they don't change, like the corporations don't change, it's gonna be like disaster no matter what. So I feel like even when I go grocery shopping, I notice everybody has like, those like
recycle
bags, right? But inside the recycle bags, even for me, when I start shopping, I can't avoid all these plastic wraps because everything from fruits, produce, and veggies, they're all covered in like plastic. So how do we like change that? So I'm hoping. I still have a long way to go in making this documentary, but I'm hoping to start addressing those questions. And the point of my documentary is not to like pinpoint like whose fault it is. I'm trying to highlight, like I said before, I'm trying to like bring in all these change makers who are doing their part to make a difference. And hopefully during that process, I can also learn a thing or two and start, incorporating in my daily lives and practice as well.
That's fantastic, Danny. Now, the creative industry in Malaysia is hard hit by the pandemic, right? Lockdowns after lockdowns, that there is almost no end to when the situation will get better. Of course, in our country, we talk about herd immunity, where we try to get as many people vaccinated as possible. But it's still a long way to go to opening up borders and opening up a lot of activities, right? Filming is obviously almost at a standstill here. How is it in Seoul? Have you been able to do any filming during this last, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months, or has it just been quiet all along and you've just been doing research work for now?
Actually, we did pretty okay during the beginning of the pandemic, right? It's like South Korea, we were like bragging about how we effectively managed the virus, but now it's a total different story. So I did manage to film, not just zero waste, but other projects before that, prior to that. I worked on like Wall Street Journal's like short documentary project last year. And for zero waste, I finished shooting the first rounds back in July. So I started shooting like end of May. So it took me like about 5-6 weeks to shoot, like for 15-day duration. So I was actively shooting. Of course, following those strict COVID-19 protocols, I was always wearing masks, using hand sanitizers. But it's not like we never had a complete lockdown like any other countries. So like I remember last year when I was teaching at University of Utah in Songdo, Incheon, I was like having lunch with my student and I saw some TV drama shooting happening like right in front of me. So I was like, whoa, what's that? And it was this famous K-drama with Kim Soo-hyun called like It's Okay Not to Be Okay or something like that. I ended up watching that TV drama anyway, but it was anyway. So documentaries are a little bit more flexible because we don't have to like strictly control the environment, but at the same time it's also challenging because it's a real life situation. So for me personally, I had to struggle a lot when I was filming because all these places said no to me because citing the COVID-19 reasons, obviously. So I'm still like trying to figure out how to get access to like, landfills and like plastic waste recycling center. I'm actually having lunch with one of the district office PR person tomorrow because he was really willing to help me
Mhm.
last like May or something, but it didn't really pan out because all these like government officials were like kind of like backing down. Um, but he just like called me out of the blue. Hey, are you still working on that documentary? I was like, yes. Um, he was like, okay, let's meet and have lunch. So I'm gonna
Mhm.
hopefully rekindle his passion in helping me so I can get the shots I need because I had this grand vision of like flying a drone and this massive
Oh yes.
plastic like wasteland and to illustrate how serious we have
Yeah.
our plastic situation is because it's ironic so far I've been telling people I'm working on a plastic waste documentary but I don't have the core footage besides all these like news archives and
Mhm.
I'm the type of person who wants to shoot my own footage rather than
Yeah.
relying on the news archives if I can. So yeah.
Now, this is an interesting question from Taksun Chung here. It says here, Danny, the recent UN report on climate change, which is the IPCC, describe it as a code red for humanity. If you do a documentary on climate change from the eyes and perspective of animal, how would you narrate the story?
Oh, that's a good one. You know what's so funny? Ever since the pandemic, I've been hearing all these news reports say there's one upside of this pandemic is because all the human activities stop,
Mhm.
all these like wildlife and natures are returning to places
Yes.
like Brazil and all these like
Yeah.
Amazon forest, rainforest, and things like that. So I don't want to sound too like doom and gloom, but I think for the sake of climate change and all these like environmental effects, like COVID-19 has at least one positive spin to this chaos is that animal wildlife is actually thriving now. And the question is, okay, so we will eventually get over this pandemic no matter what, because human history, we're always like good at overcoming adversaries. And the question for me, I want to address is after we overcome this crazy 2 year long or God knows how many more years pandemic is over, how are we as human beings should be responsible in taking care of our nature and leave the animal world as they are right now with the pandemic and they're slowly returning to like their natural habitats.
Habitat, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to like I'm always fascinated with animals as well because believe it or not, when I was growing up, my dream was to become like a zoologist. Um, but that dream kind of transpired to becoming like a doctor at some point. But then now I'm a filmmaker because I kind of transition into like wanting to pursue like field of medicine to filmmaking when I was in college. So I do want to. It's funny that he mentions climate change because after I'm done with the zero waste project, I do want to create like a series of environmental themed like documentaries, starting with zero waste. I think my next project, this is just like me in my head, but it's gonna be about renewable energies like EVs and like wind farms and like
Mm-hmm.
solar panels and things like that.
Solar panels, yeah.
I think my grand finale of like 3 part series will be on climate change, which is gonna be
Fantastic.
hopefully it will be around the same time as like the 2050. Wait, not 2050, but like the goal they set 2030. Yeah. Um, and hopefully I'll keep my research up and stay relevant to facts and figures and but then I don't want to do like a investigative like TV news
Mm-hmm.
doc style report because I feel like if people want to watch those type of documentaries, they have plenty of options. It's not
Mm-hmm.
for me to get into that sphere. I'm more
Mm-hmm.
interested in telling like individuals like kind of like character driven dramas, even in documentary genres. I think a lot of narrative like fiction filmmaking techniques can be incorporated. um, so I'm kind of like experimenting with that
Mm.
like style. I don't know how it's going to come out in the end, but at least I can try and say, hey, this is what I came up with.
Great. Danny, last two questions from me. The first one, the second last one, sorry. Has there been any form of government support in terms of grants or funding for people like you, filmmakers like you who are doing documentaries and whatnot? How is that landscape like in Seoul?
I wish I could bear with some good news, but what I'm gonna say now is gonna be like depressing almost, because good news is if you're doing documentaries, there's a lot of options in terms of like seeking like government support and grants and things like that. But maybe because this is my first directorial debut, I've been met with all these challenges. All the documentary grants I've applied so far, I've met with rejections. But I don't want to sound too gloomy, because I feel like because I spent X amount of time preparing for those government documents, and believe it or not, they ask you for everything, and it's a lengthy process. So I was kind of like self-discovering myself during that process. So I feel like now, after getting rejected for like 3 different organizations, I feel like I incurred enough like data almost, and can kind of like have like a skeleton to like upgrade for next rounds. Because one of the recent feedback I got from Korea's like TV, like I don't know what their English name is, but there's a government group that supports like TV documentaries. And even though I didn't get the fund this time, she was like, hey, we're going to do the same thing again in December, and you're more than welcome to reapply.
Yes.
And there's been some cases where people who reapply got the funding. And what's the reason I was kind of like hoping for that particular grant was they were actually eyeing for international co-productions, because they're trying to support all these like independent documentary filmmakers in Korea to make bridges to these filmmakers or TV stations outside of Korea. And when I first started Docu Plus, aside from being social impact storytelling collective, I had this vision of like connecting with filmmakers and TV producers abroad to, encourage, for more collaborations and do more co-productions. So, I just started in March, so it's just like 6 months old. But moving forward, I think like my year 2022, 2023, my goal is to, build more connections like that. And, hopefully like maybe not with zero waste, but my future projects, I could start like working with TV film folks in Europe or US or like even Malaysia, who knows,
Yeah. Great. I mean, our doors are always open for great talent and great content from anywhere in the world. And now that we are connected, you can always get in touch with me when that day comes and you decide you want to do something in Malaysia as well. Now, my last question, Danny, any word of advice for youths, not just in terms of social and environmental issues, but perhaps youths who are probably doing the same thing as you, filmmakers, content creators, creative creators, any word of advice?
At the end of the day, I'm just gonna say it's not gonna be easy trying to dive into this profession, especially with all these different options like TikTok, all these like short form medias exploding, like TikTok, Instagram stories, reels, things like that. But I guess at the end of the day, if you should listen to your heart, and if you just follow your passion and spend like X amount of time building your skills and like experience. Like it took me a long time to get where I am, and I'm kind of like humbled to be here in the first place, because I'm not like super famous yet, and it's not like I'm chasing for fame either. So I think there's that difference. If you're like the type of person who is drawn because to like film and TV industry because of the fame and things like that, chances are you might meet with more like disappointments and like all these obstacles because it's challenging. It's hyper competitive, you know, especially like places like in LA. When I was working, I realized there's so many talent out there who wants the same job as me. So how do I make, you know, stand out from that crowd?
Yeah.
So that was a big challenge. But once you figure out what you're good at, and if you can like sell yourself that you're good at XYZ, people will start notice, because I feel like it's more showing your results than telling, if you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people tend to like talk themselves out of like situations like that. But you know, sometimes that might work, but at the end of the day, if you don't have anything concrete to show, people are not going to take you seriously. That's why when I was starting Zero Waste, even though back in my mind I always had this vague idea that I wanted my own production one day and start making films, it wasn't until this year when I finally started doing it, I had this like, because I had that same doubt, oh my god, who's going to take me seriously, right? So I just started by doing it and hoping that once I could show people at least a couple trailers and how serious I am, they'll, you know, try to like take me more seriously. And I think it's starting to show, because I'm here talking to you guys, and I'm always on Clubhouse and like all these, like I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, if you've noticed. So I'm trying to like build my audience, and hopefully, like I said before, like once I'm done with this film next year and ready to show in different film festivals or like TV broadcasts, you know, we can build that social like media presence and like start the effective like impact like campaign. You know?
Now talking about building audience, you have a YouTube channel, correct? And how do we search for it?
It's simple. You can go on to YouTube and search DocuPlus. I can even here. Can I send you guys the link here?
Sure. So it's Docu with the plus symbol, correct?
Yes. Or you could do like DocuPlus Zero Waste, and you should see it.
And speaking of zero waste, Danny, just before I do that, I obviously would like to thank you for coming on the show and helping us kickstart edition 3 this time around. And it has been a wonderful conversation with you. I think from this short time that we've had, we've truly learned quite a fair bit about the situation in Korea and the many facades of chain makers that are really making a change in the society in Korea. And we will end the session here, Danny, by showing the trailer for Zero Waste. So this could be in a way a premiere for most of our audiences here in Malaysia and around the world as well, if they've not checked it out on YouTube. So with that, Danny, I wish you all the best. I wish DocuPlus all the best. And I wish everyone in Seoul and your team and everyone else to stay safe and be well.
Thank you so much for having me today. And, you know, we can always chat. So
definitely
keep in touch. And if any of the audience have questions, feel free to like email me. All my contact infos are pretty easy to find. Or you can ask Andrew if you want.
And it's also on the website, on the platform as well. So under the speaker section, you know, there are ways to get in touch with Danny as well.
So my doors are always open. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask me or give me any words of wisdom and encouragement, because I need it.
Nice. Okay, we will roll the trailer in just 5 seconds, and with that, Danny, I am closing the room. I'll see you again. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
The pandemic has seen a huge increase in use in plastic waste. According to a government study in 2016, South Korea was the world's biggest consumer of plastic materials per capita.
처음에는 저도 코로나 사태가 터진 이후에 경각심이 딱히 들진 않았던 것 같아요.
지금 MZ세대의 그런 소비 문화도 어떤 그냥 단순한 취향이나 기호가 아니라 이제 가치를 보고 소비를 하기 시작했다라고 이렇게 사회적으로도 읽히고 있잖아요.
환경의 날을 맞이하여 오늘 이 자리에서 재활용이 어려운 화장품 용기 재질 개선과
다른 나라와 비교해서는 모든 국민이 이렇게 재활용품을 분리 배출하는 국가는 없어요.
제가 생각하는 제로 웨이스트는 정말 기본적인 거라고 생각을 해요. 사실 개인이 모여서 하는 실천이 세상을 다 바꿀 수는 없겠지만 그래도 정말 진지하게 같이 고민하고 해결하려고 노력한다면은 정말 나아질 수 있는 게 지금 저희가 겪고 있는 문제라고 생각을 하고
Hi, my name is Aru. I am one of the researchers and co-founders at Klima Action Malaysia, which is a climate justice movement here based in Kuala Lumpur. I would like to wish everyone Happy Nationals Day. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Greetings all, it's Conso Tedes here from Melbourne, Australia. Just dropping a short little video message here to my friend Andrew Tai and all his colleagues at SNAPC at the Malaysia's premier virtual event solution provider. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan to all of you. Wishing you all a safe, healthy Malaysian Independence Day on the 31st of August. Please take care of each other and enjoy all the Independence Day celebrations. See you soon.
Hello all, this is Craig Langley. I run a global business development agency based near London, and I'd just like to wish everyone a very happy National Day. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Hi everyone, my name is Ria Eichmann. I'm a global skills coach and an intercultural trainer based in Brisbane, Australia. I would like to wish you all a happy National Day. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Hello everyone, my name is Teddy Swapcheva, CEO at Innovate Circular and Sustainable and founder at SO, based in Oslo, Norway. I would like to wish you all wonderful national celebration. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Hey everyone, Tyler Chin here, interview coach and founder of Transform Cultures. Just want to stop by and wish all my fellow Malaysians a Selamat Menyambut Hari Kebangsaan. Stay safe everyone and hope all is well with you.
Happy National Day Malaysia. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan. I'm Serena, founder and CEO of Care Bear, a mental health technology startup and social enterprise based here in Hong Kong, where we alleviate depressive symptoms among youth. I hope all of you prosperity and most importantly good health, and I wish you guys all the best. Bye!